Well, good morning, everyone. Pastor Alan here. Special greeting to everybody at the Ascent and all those at our Clemens campus and our Union Cross campus and everywhere else that people will be coming under the sound of the gospel. Are you ready for some good news? It is more blessed to give than to receive. And that is especially good news because you can't control how much you receive, but you can choose how much of your life you give away. These are the words that are on the lips of Jesus, but not in the Gospels. As we begin a whole new series about this concept of more blessed to give than receive, we're going to unlock one of life's greatest secrets that is something Jesus must have probably just said over and over, and certainly his whole life modeled it. When Paul is speaking to the Ephesian elders in Acts chapter 20, he references Jesus as always saying this. Acts chapter 20 and verse 32 is where we are. Acts 20, verse 32. And now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and to give you the inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel. You yourselves know that these hands minister to my necessities and to those who are with me. In all things I have shown you that by working hard in this way, we must help the weak. And remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. I can remember distinctly getting a brand new football for Christmas when I was a little kid. I remember getting that I remember the smell of its leather. I wanted that new football, and I can remember the smell of the leather and the feel of it, that pee-wee-sized football. And I was going to be the kid now in the neighborhood who had the best football, and everybody was going to want to play with that when we had our pickup football games. And I can't remember if it was on the Christmas afternoon or the next day that we went across the street to Bob Phillips' house, and we had a little game there. I was quarterback, and I think Danny Tehan, who used to always be my main receiver, might have been on my team, and we were just having a little game of football there, either Christmas Day or the next day with my brand new football. And I had told everybody, be careful, I don't want it to go out on the road and get scratched or anything like that. I want to take good care of the football. And somewhere in the middle of that little pickup football game, somebody bobbled a pass. The ball went out into the street exactly as a car was coming by, and it ran over it so perfectly that there was an actual loud pop, and you could hear like a small explosion that my football had not lasted more than a day, and it was gone. And I think I started learning from a very tender age that if you get something and it makes you very happy, if you are to lose that thing and your happiness was dependent on what you got, then all of a sudden your happiness is out the window. I was elated to have my football, and I was despaired that suddenly my football was gone. And life is sort of like that. If you build your life on what you can get and what you can get, what you can get, isn't it very, very fragile? And what we're going to see today and what we're going to see in coming weeks is a mystery unveiled through a teaching that Jesus must have in 1,000 different ways demonstrated in his life and taught, and must have been a common refrain on his lips. It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. And I hope to show you today and in coming weeks just how profound this is, how deep this is. And I want to show you in coming weeks all the different ways that this plays out in our lives. How it is more blessed to praise than it is to be praised. How it's more blessed to release than it is to control. Even how much more blessed it is to be a friend than it is to be befriended. In this crazy world of ours, we tend to think that everything is about get. But we're going to see that the secret of life abundant is exactly the opposite. Let's just start with this. Life depends on truth and fullness of that truth means fullness of life. And wherever we're deceived, it leads us away from life. There's a lot of humor about all the sayings of there are two types of people. You know, you hear this, there are two types of people. I looked up some of the funny ones this week. There are those who walk into a room and say, there you are, and there are those that walk in and say, here I am. There are two types of people, those that cut their sandwiches horizontal and those that do it diagonal. I think diagonal is more fancy. I like to do it that way. There are two types of people, those who are wise and those who are otherwise. There are two, this is a pretty funny one, those who finish their sentences and those, anyway, you get the idea. But I really do think that there are two types of people when it comes to this issue. There are those that believe that it is more blessed to receive than give and pursue receiving with all of their energy. And there are those, and sadly this number is smaller, who have discovered this secret that it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. It is, I want to make this case before you, it is one of hell's greatest lies and most profound tactics that shows up in our culture. You almost just breathe it in to make you think that the goal of life is to get more and more. In fact, there's a so you can get type of syndrome. You know, we start it with our little kids. Get a good education so you can get a good job, so you can get a good income, so you can get a good retirement, so you can get a good amount to pass on to your children so that then they can get a good education, so they can get a good job, so you can get a good income, so you can get. And it's amazing how many people just live as if this is the meaning of life. And this mentality can lead you into so many other errors. Let me put it this way. This is the way I see truth and falsehood. It is about where you're going to wind up. And if you start with a foundational deception, then everything that's built on that is going to be faulty and it's going to take you to a very bad place. I mean, if you think that 2 + 2 = 5, and you build everything else in your mathematical world on that, then everything else is going to be wrong. Can you just imagine? What if the NASA mathematicians, especially I was thinking of the movie Hidden Figures and the figure of Katherine Johnson, who was working calculations for the flight trajectories for Project Mercury when we were trying to get somebody into orbit. But wonder if instead of knowing 2 + 2 is 4, she and the others had said 2 + 2 is 5, and then all the projections were based on that error. Well, we would never gotten somebody into orbit. We would never get somebody to the moon. We would wind up crashing people, right? I mean, if you build upon something that's not true, you'll run at the wrong place. I mean, wonder if you thought that north was south and south was north. And somebody says, well, how do you get to Canada? And you say, oh, well, you head south from North Carolina. It's south. Or the Florida's up north from North Carolina. You're going to just wind up in the wrong place. You must understand that Satan is the father of lies, and all of hell operates by the practice of bringing about deceptions. And there's nothing that hell would like to do more than to bring some foundational deceptions into your life, so that you then build on that and everything after it is wrong. So I'm saying that it is just as ridiculous to build your life on the foundation of a principle that says you're more blessed if you get than if you give. That if Jesus' words are true, then building your life on that deception is going to wind up taking you so many errors. But if you get hold of a truth, it's going to change the whole nature of your life. In the first place, a part of this, and it's just the beginning part, but I think it's important to address, is that I think Jesus is talking about happiness at some level. People want to be happy. And it's interesting, I've been studying this week. Interestingly, Americans are, by their own reports and their own survey results, they're not that happy. In 2016, only 31% of Americans basically reported that they were happy. That number went up slightly to 33% in 2017. I'm not saying that the goal of life is to be happy, but let's just start with this. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trivializing the biblical distinction of joy and blessedness, because we're going to come and we're going to talk about that. But I just want to first expose the lie that what you get is going to make you happy. A well-known review of very successful men in the first part of the 20th century highlighted that in 1923 at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago, Illinois, 8 of the most powerful money magnates in the world had gathered for a meeting. These 8, if combined their wealth, controlled more money than the U.S. Treasury at that time. In that group, there were men such as Charles Schwab. He was the president of a steel company. Richard Whitney, the president of the New York Stock Exchange. Arthur Cutten, a wheat speculator. Albert Fall, a presidential cabinet member. Jesse Livermore, greatest bear on Wall Street in his generation. Leon Fraser, president of the International Bank of Settlements. And Yvonne Kruger, head of the largest monopoly. But if you came and looked later in life, you'd be just shocked. Of that assembly of men, what happened later in life? Charles Schwab died penniless. Richard Whitney spent the rest of his life serving a sentence in Sing Sing prison. Arthur Cutten, the wheat speculator, became insolvent. Albert Fall was pardoned from a federal prison so he could die at home. Leon Fraser, the president of the big international bank, committed suicide. Jesse Livermore committed suicide. And Yvonne Kruger committed suicide. I mean, none of these guys, they lived through a depression and all this, but it's just, you would think that if there was any truth to getting, that the people who had obtained a lot would be the ones that were happiest. And oftentimes people think that if you just had some windfall of success or some windfall of good luck, that you would suddenly be happy. It's something like winning the lottery. We would tend to think of that. You know, it's interesting. In 1978, a trio of researchers at Northwestern University and the University of Massachusetts interviewed recent winners of the Illinois State Lottery, and also they interviewed recent victims of tragic accidents that had rendered people paraplegic or quadriplegic. And the recent accident victims actually reported more happiness from everyday pleasures like chatting with a friend or laughing at a joke or receiving a compliment. I mean, there were some ways in which those who had received the lottery windfall reported at that moment some greater happiness, but only by a little bit. But on all the other measures, can you imagine that? You can't have a more stark contrast. That people who just lost their health, lost something most precious to them, on the whole, for most of everyday life, were reporting greater happiness than those who just won the lottery. It's crazy. Jack Whitaker, a West Virginia man, won $315 million Powerball jackpot in 2002. And at first, he gave millions to charity. He set up a $14 million foundation to start his own foundation and all that. But later, just horrible things happened. $500,000 in cash and cashier's check was taken from his car while he was parked at a strip club. And then his office and his home were broken into. He's arrested twice for drunk driving. His granddaughter died under suspicious circumstances. And by 2007, he'd spent most of his money. And he told reporters, "I wish I'd just torn that ticket up." Isn't that fascinating? That's not to say that there's anything wrong with sudden windfall of wealth. And God blesses us with wealth at times. But it's just to say, do not fall under the illusion that those people are going to be happy because they got a lot. A British newspaper some years ago had a contest to see who could best answer the question, who are the happiest people on earth? And here are some of the top answers. A craftsman or artist whistling over a job well done. A little child building sandcastles. A mother bathing her baby. A doctor who has finished a difficult operation and saved a human life. Do you begin to see what those things have in common? They're not really about getting something. They're in some way about giving of oneself. It's interesting that science has actually shown that giving makes you happy. Showing kindness leads to happiness. One study proved that if someone received a monetary windfall and then spent it on someone else, that they were significantly happier than if they'd spent it on themselves. In his book, Flourish, Martin Seligman explains, he's a University of Pennsylvania professor, that helping others can improve our lives. And he finally concluded saying this: we scientists have found that doing a kindness produces the single most reliable momentary increase in well-being of any exercise that we have tested. Well, this is secular research. Brene Brown, secular Houston researcher who has studied much about empathy and shame and relationships, she says, I made a commitment never to talk about joy for the rest of my career without talking about gratitude. Because in 12 years of research, I have never interviewed a single person with the capacity to really experience joy who does not also actively practice gratitude. What is gratitude? Gratitude is not about you getting something. Gratitude is about you giving something. But Jesus is talking about something much deeper than happiness. Blessedness is deeper, broader, and so much more far-reaching than our idea of happiness. It's interesting, and just trying to understand the difference between happiness and blessedness, if you just look it up in Merriam-Webster, you don't see that much of a difference between the definitions. It's interesting. In fact, we're starting to lose the idea of what blessedness means. You know, I'm not much on social media at all, so I don't really know how these things work. But this whole hashtag blessed has started to erode the meaning of being blessed, because it seems like now, you know, a celebrity is at a party wearing an expensive dress, post a picture of herself, hashtag blessed. And it has become sort of a way to brag about oneself, you know, and send out the, just tweet it out or whatever, and say hashtag blessed, because all of a sudden that makes it like it wasn't arrogant or prideful to say, hey, just made a 4.0 and got voted most popular in the school, hashtag blessed. We have eroded the meaning of this, and one comedian tweeted, I thought this was pretty funny, how we trivialized it. He said, yeah, caught a piece of bacon falling out of my sandwich right before it hit the ground. Hashtag blessed. We're starting to, we can't lose this word blessed. No, the culture's taken so many words away from us. We can't lose this one, because this is our word. It is a word that is rooted in God's fundamental favor upon humanity. From the beginning, He blessed Adam and Eve. It was the means by which He brought the fuel and energy into their lives to take dominion in the earth. It is that deep-seated awareness of the affections, mercies, favor, and love of God. It is the sense of God's hand upon one's life. And Adam and Eve were blessed by God before He ever told them to be productive or fruitful and multiply in the earth. Adam and Eve were blessed. God brought Abraham out of the Ur of the Chaldees, and the promise that He has is that you're blessed, and everybody's going to be blessed through you. It is at the foundation of the whole story of the people of God, that God blessed this people. And He was showing us a picture of how His heart is towards us, that is God's nature to want to bless. According to Kettle's Dictionary of the New Testament, the Old Testament view of blessedness means fullness of life, and it's usually related to wisdom and virtue. In the New Testament, again quoting from Kittle, it refers overwhelmingly to the joy which accrues to man from his share in the salvation of the kingdom of God. The word for blessing and blessed in both the Old Testament and the New Testament almost always refers to a person. The few instances that it refers to a thing, even in those instances, it's more about blessed are your eyes for they see. Because this is the nature of God to impart blessing in what He wants to do. So Mary, when she is visited by an angel and told that she is going to be the mother of Messiah, her response is to extol the Lord and praise Him, because from now on all would call me blessed, because she's going to be the mother of the Savior of the world. You get a sense early on in Jesus' ministry that He's turning everything upside down. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are those who are meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And you begin to see that the notion of blessedness is something that is much greater than the transitory happiness that can be so fleeting. You got a football now, next moment is run over by a car, it's gone. He's talking about something that is much greater than that. It's related to belief. When Peter confessed that Jesus was Christ, the Lord, the Messiah, he said, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you." You are blessed when you have faith. You are blessed when you see a revelation from God. Blessedness is related to a faith that we have a future security, a confidence in the goodness of God. I'm trying to talk about what it means to be blessed. Blessed is the one whose sin is not counted against him, Paul said in Romans. It reminds us of Psalm 32. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord counts no iniquity. Knowing that you have been forgiven is what makes you blessed foundationally. You're free, you're forgiven. It's a concept that's very prevalent in the book of Revelation. The idea of being blessed. Blessed are those that die in the Lord. Blessed are those that are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Blessed are those that have the right to the tree of life. So I'm distinguishing happiness, a good feeling, perhaps contentment, pleasant sentiments, and enjoying life amidst usually good circumstances, and happiness is a good thing. But what we mean by blessedness, this is not a succinct definition, but I've written it down because I couldn't find a definitive explanation of blessedness, so I'll take a shot at it. It's an awareness of divine favor, which brings not only the happiness and contentment of current well-being, but also enduring gratitude that knows that the favor shown to you has not come from within yourself, but from God. It is accompanied by a sense of divine purpose flowing in your life, accompanied by profound meaning to it all. It is an awareness that the Creator of the universe is mindful of you, loves you, has affection for you, so that you are at every moment in a real relationship of perfect love from God. And all of this is accompanied by the inward security of knowing that you have God as your Father and provider, and that your future is filled, therefore, with good things, and that you will live with God for all eternity. Now, that's too long of a definition to write down, but I think that's what it's about. That's far different than just happiness. Now, I say all that to come just to this one phrase of Jesus, which is my whole focus for today, is just what is this mystery he's speaking of, that it's more blessed to give than receive. And this is what I want to show you today and in coming weeks. This is the revelation that is so important, is that the giving of your life, the giving is the blessing. It is not merely an avenue to the blessing. It is not something that God is saying, if you will give and serve and give financially and bless others and do things for others, then later on you will find a blessing in it. No, I think that Jesus is saying that it is more blessed to give than receive, because in the midst of your giving, you are living out your design, and you are living not only in the model of Jesus, but you're living in the power of Jesus, because he's made you this way. And therefore, blessing is being released in your life. I mean, there's so many examples I could think of, but let's just start with this, being a parent. And everywhere I go now, people say, well, what's it like being an empty nest? Our kids, are now out of the home. Abby's at college, Bennett's married in law school, and so most of the time it's just Ann and me at home now. So life's been very, very different this year. What's that like? And I first tell people, I need to be honest with you, I'm grieving because I would put it this way: raising those kids has been the most fun thing I've ever done. It is just so fun. I love being a parent. And most parents, especially once they've raised their kids, but most parents will tell you, yeah, it's a great, great blessing. Well, think about this. beloved, think about this for just a moment. I mean, I was thinking back about the blessing of us being parents and how this whole thing got started. And I remember, I'll never forget, that when our first child was on the way, and we went to the hospital, and in order to try to hasten the coming of this child, Anne was advised to walk the hallways of the hospital. Well, we walked the hallways all night long. I mean, little Bennett was just not quite ready to come into the world. So by the time that she was ready to give birth to this child and he was ready to come in the world, bless her heart, she was exhausted. She'd basically been up all night. We'd come in the middle of the night. She'd been walking all night. And then she's supposed to do this grand work of delivering this baby, and bless her heart. By the time she pushed and pushed, and by the time finally the child was born, she was exhausted. And she had later what someone described to us as some back labor, which ended up using muscles in the back. Her back was so sore. I mean, she was in so much pain, bless her heart, after all of that. Well, at the hospital we were at in Durham, North Carolina, they had a nice thing. I don't know if the hospitals do this still or do it around here anywhere. But on the day after, we spent the night at the hospital, the day after, they have a moment where you can go in a separate room, and the baby's in the nursery, and they'll serve you a nice meal. And for this occasion, Anne had a nice new nightgown. It was kind of her one little sign of I'm still a person, you know, and this moment of dignity after all of the earthiness of delivering a baby. And so we went and we sat and she put on that nightgown, that thing, and we went down and had our meal and we talked, and she was starting to feel a little better. And we went and got the baby, and she fed little Bennett and put him up on his shoulder, and he spit up all over her brand new nightgown. It didn't last as long as my football did when I was a kid. And it's just like, there you go. There you have a symbol, because actually Bennett would spit up almost every time he would eat. And so every bit of clothing you had, everything, you know, is covered with spit. But when we got home, he wouldn't nurse very well. And so and we're total novices at this, and Anne's trying to nurse the baby and she's just like, please baby, eat. And he just wasn't latching on, he just wasn't feeding very well. And she had not slept at the hospital. It's down, we're home. She's up at night trying to get, she's like, and then all of a sudden I looked at my wife and I said, there's something wrong with her. She started having tremors. She had chills. I said, sweetie, what is wrong with her? And she's like, I don't know, I don't feel too good. And I was like, I'm thinking about, here's the day after we've come home from the hospital, I'm thinking about taking my wife back to the hospital. Something is wrong here. And thankfully her mom was there. She said, listen, it's not going to hurt this baby. We're going to go give him a bottle, and you got to get some sleep. And we went down and gave him the bottle, and finally she got some sleep. And and that was just the beginning of parenting, because then what you get to do after that is get up every night and lose your sleep and change diapers and change your schedule. And then they get a little older, you drive them everywhere that they need to go. You disrupt your entire life for the sake of their life, and they don't even know all the things that you're doing for them. Hashtag blessed. And yet, I truly say, parenting has been one of the greatest blessings of my life. And I'm not saying I'm going to go back and could bring a little baby home and do all that over again, but I'm just saying I loved it. I mean, I was so blessed by it. Do you see the mystery that I'm talking about? God has so designed you that you are going to be most blessed when you are outwardly focused and loving and serving and giving. It happens physiologically in our bodies, actually. It's fascinating. It's interesting. Studies have shown, you know, when a mother nurses her baby, that there are endocrines that are released in her that actually make her feel happy. You know, when you exercise, you give yourself over to exercise. And you might have to kind of press through at first. It's just like, like that. But then there's something that gets released where you actually feel better, right? I mean, I'm just saying, physiologically, this is true. As you are giving, something is blessing you. Well, it is the same way in our life pursuits. So even something like, for me, preaching the gospel, where I want to give, right? I want to give the gospel away. But being allowed to do that, to have someone who's hungry to hear the gospel, it blesses me to give. Right? If you're an excellent cook, you're not just cooking so that you can have something and you can get it for yourself. You want to share it, right? Because the joy is in blessing somebody else with it. There's so much of life like this where you are blessed as you give. It is a principle of life. And even in the more trivial things, like, I talk about enjoying golf as much as I do. Well, even with that, is it so much that golf gives me something, or I give myself over to golf? I walk the course. You almost always walk. I get out there. I'll play 9 holes. I've walked 3.5 miles. I'm swinging the club. I'm having to concentrate. Even with something like you're giving yourself to it. So it's not just that later there's a blessing as you give your life away. There is blessedness in the midst of it. And there's more than this in the gospel, as we'll be discovering, that there is a principle that accompanies this, that if you want to be great, then you will find yourself the servant of all, right? This is what Jesus said. If you want to be great, he didn't say it's wrong for you to want to be great. He said, but you need to find a different way, because the fact is that you're going to become great by the act of serving, by giving. So Jesus was not against our blessedness or our greatness, but he redefined how it is that you are going to be blessed, or what it is that makes someone great. And some people discover this and they build their whole life on it. Some people, and the people that live like this, they hardly even know that they're doing it. The left hand doesn't even know the right hand's doing it. It's just their nature, right? And these people are not just happy, but they are purposeful, they are blessed, they find it to be life-giving to them. This is what it means. And for some, it's a battle to come against the culture's message that says just the opposite. And even when you taste and see that the life of giving yourself away is the life of blessedness, it's still hard to combat against what the rest of the message of the culture and what you've always maybe believed is. There was a renowned psychiatrist who saw a depressed patient, and one week he assigned to her that she would go and visit the skilled nursing facilities and visit people that were there, infirmed, and the elderly. And so she went and she visited. She came back to the doctor's office the next week, and he could see her countenance had changed. She actually was, some of the depression had lifted. She was much better. And so the psychiatrist spoke to her and said, well, this is wonderful. He said, now we've discovered something that really is going to help lift the depression. And a true story. And she said, well, what? You don't expect me to go visit the nursing home every week, do you? What Jesus is talking about is the entirety of one's life. It is not, therefore, like Jesus is saying, do your duty and love and give and serve, and then I'll come later and reward you by giving you a blessing. Instead, what Jesus is saying is take my life within you. Because here's what God did for us. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. The nature of God is he's a giver. And God, who is supremely blessed, infinitely happy, unspeakably fulfilled in and of himself, supreme and replete with joy, This is the nature of who God is. And God is a giver. It's the nature of God. So what Jesus is really inviting you into is to take his life within you. It's not Jesus saying, okay, follow this law, and then one day you'll be blessed. He has invited us into something that's altogether better and deeper and richer than that. For God gave his Son so that whoever would trust in him would receive the security of having God as a Father who is a provider, and knowing that you'll live with him forever. And the deeper the inward security of the gospel that comes into your life, then the more free you become. Instead of having to think about self all the time, you are liberated by your security of who you are in Christ. And in that liberty, you are able to develop a lifestyle of giving. You see, football, you can have it one day and it's gone the next. If you get something, it could be gone. And if your blessedness is dependent upon what you get, then it's very fragile. But if you get filled with the life of Jesus and his Spirit and take a hold of this deep mystery, then no one can ever take it from you. That your life is spilling over with purpose, spilling over with destiny as you give yourself away. It's more blessed to give than receive, and that's the gospel.